Welcome to episode 30 of the Exit Your Matrix show. Based on responses to recent content I put out that has been much shorter in length, I've decided to focus on a series of 10-minute-ish videos on specific topics. I'm going to continue doing my normal episodes, but it's very clear that what people want is less of me. So give the people what they want. The list is young but growing, and here are some of the topics that I've come up with so far, and all of these will be in 10 minutes. Capitalism, real capitalism, in 10 minutes. Objective morality, solipsism, jury nullification, Satanism, anarchy, rights, including property and property rights, epigenetics, and, of course, natural law. But in keeping with Exit Your Matrix being rooted in the conviction that the condition of one's mind is ultimately the most important factor in the search for truth and manifesting right action in the world, my first topic has to be one of the most important tools known to man. And that is not an exaggeration. And why is that? In its most direct form, because this method can identify the truth or falsehood of information. And with proper application, it can answer the question why. And that is the question we should be struggling with because it acts in the plane of causality. And that is where whatever the problem might be is rooted. Not in the plane of effects, where practically everyone, even the vast majority of those in the truth and alternate media area, are focused. To impact the realm of effects, or what we experience, we must understand the cause, the why. This is illustrated in the book Trance, Formation of America, The True Story of a CIA Mind Control Slave, where co-author Mark Phillips writes this, quote, "For every problem there exists a solution. The formula for problem solving rests firmly on the quality of the supporting research information concerning the nature of the problem, or apply it to the field of health. All too often we see the treatment of symptoms as particularly Western medicine's method, but to determine a cure, a real answer, an understanding of the symptoms is only a part of the process needed to get to the real issue, which is the cause. When we understand and apply the Trivium, we unlock our ability to improve all aspects of ourselves, but particularly our minds. That's the coveted ascent of consciousness, where we master how to understand. So without further ado, here is the Trivium. What we need to know to know. So what is the Trivium? The English word trivium is derived from the Latin tria, or three, and via, which means way, path, or road, meaning the three methods, the three ways, the three roads, or paths. And also I've seen a description of the place where three roads meet. Officially, the Trivium initially appeared in the Middle Ages, but ancient Greece is where we find the first records of it being formally studied. But there's a good bit of scholarship pointing to it coming out of the great mystery traditions of antiquity. So it's old. Before we get into the steps, there are three interpretations of the Trivium, which are classical, esoteric, and modern. So this is all about the process of gathering information, interpreting it, and then acting upon it in the world. And it's critical that it be performed in that specific order. The terms describing the three steps of the Trivium in the classical interpretation are first grammar, then logic, and finally rhetoric. The second interpretation is esoteric, where we have knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. So knowledge corresponding to grammar in the first step, understanding associated with logic and wisdom as a different way of describing rhetoric. The third and final interpretation is the modern, which utilizes a very effective metaphor, computers, to explain this process. So if you go out on the line, you'll find out input is the computer lingo for grammar and knowledge. Then there's processing corresponding to logic and understanding. And output is the computer term for wisdom and rhetoric. I think it's interesting that something I've commented on before appears here yet again, and that is these important features, concepts, and symbols of three. So just a few but very notable examples of the Trinity, which we see in major religions, thoughts, emotions, and actions as the three aspects of consciousness, and the triune brain. Now, I'll get into these in more depth shortly, but I want to show the Trivium in its broader context along with the Quadrivium, which is comprised of the 4 subjects of arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, again in that order. The Quadrivium, of course, means 4 methods or 4 paths or roads, and these are what act as measurement tools to document and apply what was learned in the Trivium. We can also call them sciences. Taken together, as you can see here, the 7 components of the Trivium and Quadrivium make up the liberal arts, which is the foundation of what we know today as a liberal arts education. One Freemason wrote, quote, "I believe that the Trivium and Quadrivium are the pillars of Freemasonry, and without them the craft is at a disadvantage, especially in this mass information world." I'll link 2 pieces by this guy, Dave Holt, and one other thing I'll point out is that despite the quote I just shared, he said his experience visiting many Freemasonry lodges is that the Trivium is rarely used. I think that's an indication of the pervasiveness of the soft condition of our minds. Even powerful esoteric traditions have lost their way. Now to the first step in the Trivium, grammar, which jumps out as a reference to words, which forms books, and books are the backbone of classic grammar. In the esoteric application, this step is referred to as knowledge. And in a third way of looking at the components of the Trivium using the metaphor of computers, this step in the process can be described as input. So we can say that grammar or knowledge or input involves gathering data from a wide and varied array of sources without prejudging it. This step answers the questions who, what, when, and where. So, basic data. Here's what Dorothy Sayers says about the work of grammar. Quote, "Look upon these activities less as subjects in themselves than as gathering together of material for use in the next part of the Trivium. What the material actually is of only secondary importance." She also described the intake of information as, quote, "grist for the mental mill to work upon." Now on to the second step in the Trivium. In the classical interpretation, it is logic, and it involves the interpretation and evaluation of what was introduced in the grammar stage. It is also known as understanding in the esoteric view, and the equivalent computer terminology would be processing. These are all terms for 3 substeps, which are filtration, correlation, and analysis, and the Quadrivium is largely utilized here. This enables us to learn why. In other words, what is the reason, meaning, or purpose? At the logic phase, Dorothy Sayers said the individual, quote, "must be ready to detect fallacy, slipshod reasoning, ambiguity, irrelevance and redundancy, and to pounce upon them like rats." This brings us to the final stage of the Trivium, which in the classical view is rhetoric, which clearly has the connotation of speech. In the esoteric interpretation, this is wisdom. And as a quick reminder, recall that wisdom is knowledge applied to create right action in the world. The computer term we'd associate with it is output, and these all make sense, with one of the ways that rhetoric can be defined is as the use of language to persuade, so it's an active outward component, or speech and action based upon the knowledge that one has gathered and understands. This is how knowledge and understanding are propagated in the world so that positive change can be created. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Trivium. But it gets better. Now, going back to the beginning and me mentioning how it is also a reality creation process, let's see how that fits into the picture. We now have to expand the behavior of the individual to the larger group, which we can call the generated result, which is the aggregate behavior of the masses, we could say. So this generated result is what we experience in the world around us, and that can either be order or chaos. Another term for this is manifested reality. Again, reality that has been initiated into existence, which can be described as the quality and the condition which manifests in any society based upon the aggregate quality of human behavior within that society. I hope this has demonstrated a time-tested and proven methodology for learning, for truth discovery, and for understanding how our reality is formed. It sure seems like the Trivium should pervade our lives, in education, in our dealings and disputes with others, and, most of all, in our contemplation of what our purpose actually may be. Thanks for joining me. Be well, and I'll see you next time.